Welcome to Washington Hospital Today, dedicated to informing residents about healthcare topics and issues. Through programs featuring community forums and free health and wellness classes, our goal is to empower community members with the information needed to make informed health decisions. Washington Hospital has been providing healthcare to the residents of the Washington Township Healthcare District for the past 60 years. Today's presenter is Nancy Liu. Nancy is a registered dietitian with Washington Hospital Healthcare System.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Diabetes Matters presentation. Today we're going to be talking about grocery shopping and label reading. So the topics we're going to go over in the breakdown here are meal planning, grocery shopping, and I'll talk a little bit on label reading, and we'll have some examples at the end for you. Now, in terms of meal planning, now it can be overwhelming sometimes, but if you're able to spend some extra time planning ahead for the week when you're busy, especially if you're working during the weekday, it can set yourself up for success. Because when you're busy and working on the weekdays, it can be easy to default to eating out, getting takeout. Maybe you don't make the best choices when you come home tired from work. So think of a few recipes you want to make, or maybe you have go-to recipes that you have in mind, and then think of what ingredients you'll need, scout what you have in your fridge and pantry, and then compare those two. And then you can compile a shopping list organized by food groups, if that is more helpful. And I'll show you on the next slide here what that can look like. So this is a handout from the VA. You'll see it's broken down into non-starchy vegetables, proteins, grains and starchy foods, dairy, fruit, drinks, and then other or miscellaneous. And you can compare this to the plate method here on the right side. So remember, we have a half plate of vegetables, and then you have a quarter plate of protein and a quarter plate of carbohydrate foods, which is the group that's going to break down into sugar in the blood. So that's why it's starred here. So even if you don't have a solid grocery shopping list every week, if you can think of having a few vegetables in your basket, a few proteins, and then a few grains, that way you can put together a meal. And then a couple of grocery shopping tips here. Don't go grocery shopping on an empty stomach, right? That's when you tend to maybe reach more for the high sugar, high fat foods you don't want to have as often. And then having a list ready, like the example on the last slide. And I think there used to be this idea that the perimeter of the store is where you want to stay around. So that's where the fresh produce and proteins tend to be. But you can, I think, also additionally find healthy choices in the center aisles as well. Could be like peanut butter, the lentils, canned beans, frozen produce as well. So I think canned and frozen produce, don't be scared of those ones. They can be just as healthy as the fresh stuff, but usually they are cheaper and they last longer on your fridge or on your shelves. Just make sure you look for low or no sodium and no added sugars. And then pre-cut produce too, I put that there. It can be an easy way to toss in vegetables into your meals. And then knowing how to read labels too, and that way you feel comfortable comparing different products and items in the store. And just a reminder for those with diabetes and prediabetes, you don't have to cut out all your carbs, but reducing or making substitutions can help with your blood sugar control. So these are some of the tips from the American Diabetes Association Diabetes Food Hub. Number one is to reduce the portion of carbs at the meal. So maybe instead of having a whole plate of pasta, like down here, you reduce it to just a quarter of the plate, like the plate method. And then you can remove one or more of the carb sources if your meal contains several. So if you're having maybe pasta and garlic bread, you just do one or the other, or you can reduce the portion of both of them. And then number three is to replace the carb portion reduced or removed with lower carbohydrate foods. So that could be adding on more protein or maybe adding on more vegetables like this example here. And then the last one is to rethink your drink. So if you already have a lot of carbs on your plate, instead of having another drink that has more carbs, such as milk, soda, sweet tea, you could add on either just sparkling water, plain water, and maybe a sugar-free drink. And then this is a scale that I like to show, this carbohydrate choice continuum. So we never want to say never in terms of food choices, but you do want to try and have a dietary pattern where you're eating more often the whole and unprocessed sources of carbs versus less often of these ones on the right side that are more processed and tend to have more added sugars in them. So the more whole grain choices or whole food choices are like your fruits and vegetables, legumes, unprocessed whole grains, and then maybe some like wheat pasta, brown rice, oatmeal, wheat tortillas, and then less often the white starches like white bread, crackers, soda. This is like Pop-Tart. Um, so in a healthy dietary eating pattern, you can include all of these, but think about how often and how much you're eating. Now for the label reading part. So the first thing you want to check is the serving size. So everything down here, all of these numbers are going to be based on that serving size. So this one is an example of bread. So if you're having 2 slices of bread, if you double the serving size, then you're going to be doubling everything here. Now looking at the grams next to each of these foods, that is the amount of those nutrients. Whereas you see on the right side here, the daily value, the percent daily value, that's showing how much of the nutrient in a serving of food contributes to the total daily diet, which is based on a general 2,000 calorie, as it says here. So for example, with added sugars, the recommended amount for a day is no more than 50 grams. So 1 gram out of that recommended 50 grams for the day gives you that 2%. So that's where that comes from. And then a few bullet points here. So we talked about percent daily value. And then as a quick way to assess if a food is high or low in that source, in that nutrient, is to see, so if it's less than 5%, it is considered a low source. And a few things that you want to look for low sources of are sodium, saturated fat, and added sugar. Whereas if it's more than 20%, it is generally considered to be a high source. So things that you want to look for high sources of are fiber, vitamin D, calcium, and iron. Now, in terms of blood sugar effect, it's the total carbohydrates. This is what is going to break down into sugar. And you see there's a couple of things indented under here. So these are all different types of carbohydrates. But the dietary fiber is one that doesn't affect the blood sugar. Whereas the total sugar, which can include some added or it could be natural sugars, is going to affect the blood sugar level. So, for example, a piece of fruit, just a plain like apple, it could have some total sugars in it. But if you have maybe like an apple jam where they add sugar to flavor and turn it into the jam texture, that is going to have added sugars. So, and if you remember from the last presentation where Temi talked about different types of sugars, the added sugars can come, you can see it in the ingredient list in different forms. It could be just cane sugar, but it could also be jaggery, agave, coconut sugar, high fructose corn syrup. And remember, it doesn't give you much nutrients. It is usually extra calories and will just spike your blood sugar. So you want to try and limit the added sugars. Whereas the dietary fiber, you want to remember this is one of the ones you want to try and look for high sources of in your foods. It can help with your bad cholesterol, help with your bowel movements, help with blood sugar control. And when you're shopping for especially starches, if it has at least 2-3 grams of dietary fiber, that's pretty good. And if it's more than 5, then that's an excellent source. And in a total day, you're generally aiming for about 25 to 30 grams of fiber. Okay, and now I'm going to go through a couple of examples. So I put here, don't shy away from the frozen foods. They can be good for when you're in a time crunch, good for convenience if you don't have a whole lot of time to cook throughout the week. And this is a comparison of different rices. So we have brown rice, and then there's a rice medley with some brown rice, red rice, quinoa, and then some jasmine rice. And if we flip it to the side and look at the labels, you'll see serving size, 1 cup, is all the same for all 3 of these. And the main thing that differentiates them is the dietary fiber. So you'll see because jasmine rice, it's on the more processed side. They've taken off the fiber from the outside. It's just the starch. So there's less than 1 gram of fiber. Whereas if you look at this rice medley that has brown rice, red rice, and black barley, sorry, not quinoa, and the organic brown rice here, they both have 3 to 4 grams of fiber. So that is considered pretty good. So these two, think of as you want more often in your diet, and this one a little bit less often. And then this is a bag of frozen broccoli. So if you look at the label here, on the ingredients list, you'll see it is just broccoli. And it's low in sodium, low in saturated fat, and low in added sugars, no added sugars. So that is a good one to have. Now this one is an example of a popsicle bar. So looking at the serving size, 1 bar. And if we go down to, so not much saturated fat or sodium, but looking at the carbohydrate section, it's got quite a bit of added sugars. And you'll see it's actually the third ingredient on the list here. So 12 grams is equal to about 3 teaspoons or 1 tablespoon of cane sugar just in 1 bar. Versus this one here, you'll see on the front right away it already says no added sugar or sweeteners. So you'll see that per 1 pop, it has no added sugars. So this would be a better one to have if you do want something cold and refreshing. And then I have a couple examples of breads here. The first one, this Ezekiel bread. We'll see it's low in sodium, low in saturated fat, and has a good amount of fiber, 3 grams per slice. And no added sugars. Whereas this one, the Dave's Killer Bread, it also similarly doesn't have much saturated fat or sodium. Has a good amount of fiber, but it also does have 5 grams of added sugar. So now that's based on 1 slice. And if you're making a sandwich, you have 2 slices of bread, that's 10 grams of added sugar, almost as much as that popsicle, or 2 to 3 teaspoons. And this one is similar. The white bread also has 4 grams of added sugar for 2 slices, but it doesn't have much fiber since it's white bread. So at least this one has some fiber in it. You'll see the added sugars, it can pop up anywhere, maybe in places you don't expect. Even if it's advertised as, organic, whole grain, it's still something you want to look for. And then this example, we have a canned lentil soup, vegetable lentil soup. Looks pretty good. It says, 14 grams of protein. It's plant-based. We know that lentils are a good plant-based source of protein. But looking at the serving size for the whole container, well, even for just 1 cup, you're getting over 20% of sodium, 28% here. So low in saturated fat, no saturated fat, and it has a good amount of fiber, but the sodium is considered on the high side, especially if you drink, if you're maybe heating up the whole can, then you're getting 52% of your daily value of sodium, which is quite a bit. And then this one here is blueberry scones from the bakery section. So you see per 1 scone, you're getting about 52 grams of carbs, a little bit of fiber, but it's also got 16 grams of added sugar there. So this is also on the less often side on that carbohydrate continuum. And then I have a couple of yogurts. So this one is their fruited one, guava passion fruit. It is a whole milk one, so you'll see the saturated fat is a little bit on the higher side. And then added sugars too, similar to that popsicle, 13 grams, about a tablespoon. So that is quite a bit. Versus this one, Oiko's, the high protein yogurt. You'll see there is no saturated fat since I believe it is a non-fat yogurt. And then there's also no added sugars. And it is flavored though. You'll see in the ingredients they use stevia to sweeten it. So you would want to try and get something like this more often than one with that much added sugars. Okay, and then this next example is a recipe modification. So this is just a regular chocolate chip cookie recipe. And if you were to try and make it at home, you want to try and make it maybe with a little bit less carbs. thinking about those American Diabetes Association tips, we can try and reduce, replace, rethink. So we can reduce the total amount of sugar that you're using. You can replace some of these ingredients that are higher in carbs, and then rethink perhaps the size of the cookies you want to maybe make them a little bit smaller. Now, thinking of replacing the ingredients that are high in carbs, we can try and swap out both the granulated and brown sugar, the all-purpose flour, and then also the chocolate chips. So instead, we can try and use monk fruit sweetener, which doesn't have any calories and doesn't affect the blood sugar. And it is a 1-to-1 ratio that you can swap for with regular sugar. And then we'll also replace the almond flour, which is lower in carbs than regular all-purpose flour. And then you can also find sugar-free chocolate chips, because they tend to be high in added sugars as well. So in Actual Diabetes Matters, we made this, and I think most people liked it quite a bit. They enjoyed it. So don't be scared to try out new recipes and make your own swaps at home. Here are the references, and that's all I have for you today. Thank you.